there is truly another way. There's someone who wants to hear your voice. There's someone who's been waiting for that piece to be written, and they need you. And so there is always, always, always a way. Just keep pushing.
Welcome to the Your Next Move podcast. Today, I have another good friend with me, Alyea. I am so excited to have Alyea here. We have lots to talk about. We talked about a few things off camera that we're going to need to talk about on camera too. But I literally need to read her bio so you can hear the receipts. National Geographic explorer and Fulbright alumna, Alyea Pierce uses poetry, spoken word, performance, audio, and photography to examine oral storytelling and folklore traditions across the African diaspora. She is a poet and researcher who recently contributed to National Geographic's podcast series, Into the Depths, and was recently featured on episode 1 of National Geographic's The Soul of Music, Overheard's 4-part podcast series focusing on music, exploration, and Black history. She is also a TEDx speaker, and her poetry has been published online and print, and she is also an adjunct instructor in the English department at Rutgers University. Receipts.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.
No, thank you. It is an honor, Kim. Even from back in our days, yes. I just always wanted to be in your presence. So thank you for having me.
I so appreciate that. So you have a creative career where you do so many things. Take us back to the beginning. Like, what is the story from you getting in school? Like, what did you study in school to where you are right now doing the phenomenal work with National Geographic?
So I started in communications and English for my BA, got a certificate as well in Latino and Caribbean studies.
Okay.
From there, I knew I just wanted to do something that communicated to people. I was like, okay, communication is broad enough that you can go anywhere.
Yes, yes.
And so at nights, I would go to every open mic. I would go to every poetry slam. That was my vibe.
Okay.
And then during the day, I do my studies and try and make sure I got an education because I'm a child of immigrants. So from the Caribbean, you got to get an education. So from there, I knew that I always loved teaching through creative writing and workshops. I just enjoyed engaging with youth and lifelong learners. So I knew education was a route I wanted to go. So then I got my master's of education.
Okay.
I think it gave me some foundational pieces that really helped me in terms of my business as well as my artistry. And again, I was performing after my 9 to 5 and just doing that. And it came to a point where I wanted to combine my worlds. I wanted to take a chance and actually dive into my art. I never had a chance to fully write and take a chance artistically and also culturally. So I applied for the Fulbright. I got rejected 3 times, and I'm very adamant about telling that whole full story and that testimony as a Black woman and a Black woman artist. And by the 3rd time, I got it. Fulbright-Nat Geo Storytelling Fellowship.
I love it. So tell everyone, what is Fulbright in case they don't know?
Fulbright is a prestigious award. It's an educational award in which you can do research anywhere in the world, literally. And they give you the financial support, the time, and the space to explore and examine the natural world as well as the creative world.
Do you know what the differentiating factor was that last time when you applied?
Absolutely. I think defying rejection is this combination of timing, clarity, and effort. Okay. So when we think of effort, it's that, how much am I ready to, reach out to certain networks? Am I ready to talk about, all the things that need to be done to complete this? Some folks can write a proposal or application the night before. They can prepare for a job interview the night before. That's not the best way.
Yes.
Preparation.
Preparation is key.
Yes, preparation.
Yes.
So you need that effort. Then there's clarity. I always come back to the K through 12 education, the 5 W's and the 1 H. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. So if you have that clarity, that works as well. And then timing. The first 2 we can control to an extent. Timing, You don't always have control over. And so when we think about timing, it's, are you ready for this opportunity? Is this opportunity ready for you? Is this the right opportunity for you? And then also, are you ready to receive the flowers that may come after you get this opportunity?
Oh, wow.
And are you ready for the challenges that may come after, mentally, physically, emotionally? And so I think all of that, it felt harmonious my last time. I felt the synergy. I knew what I was talking about, and I claimed who I was. The first 2 applications, I was very adamant about thinking, like, what is valuable to society? Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm an educator, but I'm applying to an arts grant.
Okay.
So I never claimed myself as a poet. No wonder why I didn't get it. Right? And then there are other pieces to it, but I think that was the first time in the 3rd application that I said, I am a poet and I'm applying for this because, and that was a moment that opened my mind.
So where did you go?
I went to Trinidad and Tobago. Yes, my mother's home.
How was it?
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And it was beautiful not only because of the beaches and all of the fresh fruit, but it was beautiful because you're seeing a culture that thrives in art. So you come to America and then art is not valuable anymore. And especially as a Black person, you know, Black, Indigenous, people of color, art is a part of us, right? We need rhythm, we need frequency, we need to move. And then you go to the Caribbean and it's like, what? This is accepted? I can move? I can spit poetry? I can do all of these things and not be judged, and it's accepted. And that was a truly solidifying moment for me that what I do matters. And it's okay if it does not matter to America, because there's other places in this world that it does matter for.
I love that. So let's go back, because you said you've essentially been doing poetry since forever. But like, do you remember your first performance?
Yes, I do.
Okay. What was it? Tell us. Break it down.
First performance, I was 13 years old. New York Knicks Poetry Slam.
Ooh.
Auditions. Yes, and I made it to the semifinals at the New Eurekan Poets Cafe. Woot, woot. Yes, and I screamed the whole time. Really? Scream.
You like yell poetry?
Yell poetry.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought that was it. Passion means I yell at you the whole time. Talk about the art of public speaking, right?
I can't.
But I truly believe that that was the way to perform. And I saw such amazing poets that I was mind blown of what you can do in the creative world, and like even just public speaking or oral storytelling, you know, oratorical competitions, if you want to be a little more on like the professional side, right? Is like, you can have humor. You can be emotional, and that's okay. Like, be vulnerable. People want to see vulnerability in your story. And that was another eye-opening moment for me that, oh, I can be vulnerable, especially again, as a Black woman. I can have a soft side and people will accept me and the judges will accept me. Okay, right? So again, this art side that we always push and push away is honestly the answer.
Oh my gosh. Is vulnerability something that you had to teach yourself over time or like release? What was your process to allowing more vulnerability in your work?
I think I'm working on vulnerability every day.
Oh, same. I was asking you to see if you had a secret that you can kind of share over here.
No secret. I think it's easy to be vulnerable through poetry.
Okay.
To be vulnerable in real life, that's terrifying to me. Because that means that is my full self. In poetry, I can edit and revise that. When I'm just coming into a space, that's terrifying. And so I do not have a secret of vulnerability. I merely say what can make another person not feel alone. So that's my motivating factor in my art, is how can I amplify lost voices of history? What is the untold story? That's what pushes me to be vulnerable in poetry. And then my poetry inspires my real life.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain that a little bit?
being vulnerable and then performing in front of 500 people, that's a motivator to then say, okay, it's safe to be real and authentic in the real world. Because if 500 people can accept my story, why can't one person in a relationship, or why can't my supervisor? And if they can't, that's a telling moment to say, okay, I know what I value. I know my non-negotiables. I know, my strengths. And I have to then kind of hold myself accountable of where, maybe I could be more vulnerable here, but that helps me find what is actually working in alignment. So that's kind of my reflector.
Oh, I so appreciate that. I feel like I need a moment, but like we're obviously recording. I feel like I want a moment to kind of let that sink in. I think when you said that, it made me think about my transition from working full-time to entrepreneurship. One of the hardest things for me was the dissonance that I felt happened. Every single time I was on stage for my company talking about my book, I felt like I was the best, fullest version of myself. I felt like I was allowed to be big. I was allowed to talk. I was allowed to share. I was allowed to laugh. I was allowed to really and truly be myself versus like the environments that I worked in, like where we worked together. My job after that, I felt like there was like a lid on who I was. I was only allowed to go but so far, do so much, say so much before there was some pressure that was like, like, stay where you are, like, don't do too much, whether it was a person, a place, institution, whatever it was. And that dissonance of like being out in the world and doing all my things and then coming back and being, I felt like smushed into that box. I couldn't take it for like, but so much longer. And that was one of the driving factors. I'm like, I can't do this dissonance anymore. Because I started to get really, really sad when I came back to work. It's like, I can have this phenomenal experience out here and I got to come back and talk to y'all and y'all want me to sit down and be quiet.
Yeah.
And it was so hard for me. So it makes me think about your analogy with like your poetry about how like you are your fullest self and that inspires you. Like if this can be accepted here, why can't I do this all the time?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. I think for me, it kind of happened a little differently. It was, I found my 9-to-5 self bleeding into my poetry and I wasn't finding enjoyment at a certain point. And that was like the push and push and push to keep applying for the Fulbright. I was like, I need the time. I need the space to be myself and take that back. So that's what I found is that it started bleeding in. And I was like, why am I not enjoying poetry anymore?
Like, you're like censoring yourself almost.
Yeah, yeah. And that's not what it's about.
And I think that happens so commonly, I think, especially when we start talking about code switching and all of that when we're in the workplace. Yes. Yes. Especially as Black women, you can find yourself adapting to whatever the majority is to be accepted, to not create dissonance, to not be seen as being too strong, too powerful, just too any adjective. And when that bleeds into who you are and you do that when you don't have to code switch anymore, that's a moment where it's like, oh, change has to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. So I want to shift gears a little bit. When you walked in today, you were like, Kim, really we're going to do this today? And you said that you were an introvert. I did not know you were an introvert.
How do you not know that?
I did not know. I didn't know. I promise I didn't know. Like, I don't understand. Well, I do understand because I think I'm also an introvert myself too. And I know that that's where my energy comes from. But how have you been what pushes you to continue to perform and do all of the amazing things that you do that are also all very public facing? Like your work period is public facing. How do you do this?
There are two sides to Alyea.
Yes.
So I find my energy, obviously, like you said, by being alone, by kind of just introspective thinking, internal processing, very much so. But the extroverted side in me is that I love to engage people. I just love people. So I guess that's the ambivert in me, right? But I love people for a certain amount of time.
And then you.
And I just, there's a limit to it. But I always say that when I go to perform, I am sweating. I am hyperventilating backstage. I am shaking. Really? If you saw me, you would think it's my first performance. I'm terrified. And as you saw when I entered,
I was like, girl, what's going on?
Gotta breathe, right? I'm like doing my stances in my power stances, everything. And
really?
That's just how I've always been. And so my kind of way to work through that is the day I stop doing that, that's when I know maybe it's time for me to stop being on stage because it doesn't make me nervous anymore. It doesn't give me that excitement and that thrill.
Really?
That's like my motivator. I don't know if it really works, but
Really?
That's how I know I care, is because I'm still so nervous and I want people to enjoy it and I want to enjoy it. So when I stop getting nervous, does that mean that I don't care what people think? And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I don't know, but
Interesting.
Yes, I get very nervous. But I love poetry.
When does the nerves do that? Does it turn off ever, like when you're on stage?
Yeah, depending on how big the stage is, and the lights, all that stuff. So if it's black and like there's only one light shining at me, after I get past the first 2-3 lines, I'm just in it. I'm in a whole other world, and that's what I live for. That experience of being so just in alignment with what you're supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's nothing that beats that feeling. So that's when the nerves turn off.
Okay. I love that. So I used to perform back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
First of all.
What did you perform? Let us know.
I used to sing back in the day. Do not sing anymore at all. Will not be singing. I'm just making that clear. But I used to sing, like one of the things, I performed all over the place, but I used to sing the Star Spangled Banner on a very regular basis at basketball games. And people used to always ask me if I was nervous. And I would say before I said the first word, I didn't know what the word was. Every single time. It's like once I said that first word, it released everything else. Yeah. And then I was okay. I could do all the things. I could have a little bit of fun with it. But I also always feel nervous. I don't think it manifests as physically anymore, but I definitely am. Because I think I'm always worried about the perception. Is what I'm saying going to be received with the intention that I'm giving it? Yeah. I think in the day and age where everything can go viral, any word or statement that you could say that's not politically correct and could be a simple slip of the tongue could then have you quote unquote canceled. That's probably one of my biggest fears. Even like recording a podcast and doing videos, like I'm allowing people to see me. And if you look at the first seasons of the podcast, I was much more stoic versus now I'm like, y'all in my home. So I have to be more me. Yeah. Yeah. But it's an evolution.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
When you started to see that your work was dripping into your art, you did Fulbright. Was there anything that you did to allow yourself to show up as more you, to be more you? What did that process look like?
In the workplace?
In the workplace, but also I think like your goal sounds like you were leaving the workplace to go do the Fulbright.
Yes.
So was there like a shedding process that had to happen once you got to Trinidad?
Yeah. I mean, number one, you're assimilating to a whole different culture. And even though I've had the privilege of engaging with that culture through my family, I mean, I had to just breathe for a second. I had to almost not have expectations or goals for the first month.
Ooh, okay.
It was just about who's my mentor out there. Let me just have conversations that are not focused on my project and my research. Let's just talk. Right. I needed to separate and have a break and remember who Alyea is. And I think that's such an important part of the process because when we're so ingrained into a specific workplace or an identity, we start to think that that is all we are and we have no worth anywhere else. And so I needed that month to just breathe, to just kind of wake up late, and late being 8 o'clock,
yeah.
Right? To do what I want to do and put a priority on that, right? And that having those lists of, what I valued and what I cared about and making that a priority was key to the shedding process.
So you actually had a physical list?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Because unless I write it down, it won't happen.
Okay.
I don't know if you're one of those people, but
a little bit, yeah.
I needed to write it down and say, okay, this is what it looks like. Because I'm such again, internal processor. I'll just keep thinking about it on rotation versus I need to see it down on paper so then I could commit to it.
Interesting. Oh, I love that. I absolutely positively love that. What was the transition like when you came back?
So I got the Fulbright during the COVID year. So my return was literally within a day. They emailed us and they said, this is what the deal is. either you can stay in country or you can return. Unfortunately, at that time, we had a president who probably would not have let me back in the country due to me being in a third world country. And so my first choice was to just return home, but I, of course, would have loved to stay. So that process was rough and very abrupt, and just having to adapt to the moment. That's what you have to do sometimes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I can only imagine, because back when COVID first started, when all those things started to happen, everything was so final because we didn't know. Mm-hmm. You could have still been in Trinidad now. Yeah. Like, knowing all the things that have happened and transpired, or you could have been there like months upon months upon months before getting back.
I calculated it with my mentor who was out there. I wouldn't have come back for nearly a year and a half. I would have been out there for almost another year.
And how long was Fulbright supposed to be?
A year.
A year, okay.
So I would have been there another year.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. They closed their borders for quite some time. Yeah.
You really would have been locked down.
Oh, yeah. I would have had good food, but I would have been locked down.
Wow. Okay. So it's a good thing then.
Yeah. I mean, when you think of it in the way of you're there to do research, I wanted to fulfill a project. If people are not doing the work that you need to do, you're kind of just there. Right? So I needed to return, and that was fine with me.
Okay. Got it. So what are you doing now? What are you working on?
Right now, as you heard, I just finished a podcast with Nat Geo, a few podcasts with Nat Geo. I'm currently working at Rutgers University as a creative writing instructor and doing some other English courses. And I'm working on a novel, a poetry novel.
Ooh. So what is your poetry about? You're allowed to, I should ask you to like give us a preview, but I won't push you too hard today.
My poetry is all about the Afro-Caribbean, growing up as Caribbean American in the States. It's about honoring stories, remembrance, memory. And most of all, it's just about being also just a Black woman. How do you navigate the world, right? Whether it's from hair to body to I'm a woman. What are the things that come with that? Is it guilt? Is it struggling to be vulnerable? What are the things and all of the things that come with every identity that I just shared?
So who is your favorite poet?
So my favorite writer is Toni Morrison.
Okay.
I could get lost in her. I would fangirl.
Really?
Toni Morrison is my heart. Because she's this perfect blend of nonfiction, poetry. It's just, and fiction. It's just beautiful the way she writes. And then I have a longer list, but Toni Morrison is always at the top.
And what's your favorite poem?
My favorite poem, it's a poem by Nikki Giovanni. And for some reason, the title always slips my mind. But if I have the book, I could flip to it in a second. But It's this poem by Nikki Giovanni. It's a love poem. And it just works. The wordplay and everything is just beautiful.
Oh, I love it. Because I don't want you to ask me to sing on the podcast, I'm not going to ask you to do a poem. But please know, in my heart and soul, my whole body wants to ask you to do a poem. But I'm also not singing, so I feel like I have to be respectful and not ask for you to perform for everybody because you're so great. But we will link a performance.
Okay. Thank you.
You'll let us know which one so people can see you because it's magical.
Well, thank you.
So final question. If someone is listening and they are interested in a career path that is similar to yours, what is the number one piece of advice that you would give them?
The number one piece of advice I would give is that even when everyone tells you no, there is still a way. It took a while for me to understand how many no's I have been getting. But there is truly another way. There's someone who wants to hear your voice. There's someone who's been waiting for that piece to be written, and they need you. And so there is always, always, always a way. Just keep pushing. And I know that sounds so easy.
It's not. Yes.
But it is a struggle. It is painful. Again, rejection, it hurts. But keep going. Yeah.
Thank you, Alyea. I appreciate you coming.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
This is an honor.
Yes. And with that, y'all, thank you so much for enjoying this. I feel like I want to process. Like I'm trying to close the podcast and I'm processing in my mind at the same time because you just shared so much. But may your next move be your very best move. Have a great day, y'all.